If you've been paying attention to Jesus' words in this compilation we call the Sermon on the Mount, then I don't know how you can read on, we're in chapter 5 now, and not be challenged by all of this. This is tough. We humans, I think, have kept our own expectations of our own behaviors pretty low throughout history. Don't murder, don't commit adultery. Just leave it there. We're comfortable there. Jesus doesn't leave it there. He can't leave it there. Time and time again, he raises the bar of holiness and holds up the standard of godliness and asks us to go deeper into the heart, calls for greater commitment to being more like God himself. Don't even be angry with your brother, he's already said. Don't call anyone a fool. Don't lust after another. And now we come to this, the next words of Jesus. Verse 31, it's been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. God never intended for divorce. He intended for marriage to be between a man and a woman for life. But as many things happen, it didn't turn out that way. Divorces started happening at some point. So God started giving them some parameters if there was a divorce. And the people of Israel, even the leaders of Israel, had found a way to manipulate things and manipulate and use each other. In those days, women were getting the shaft. Men decided to put people away, their ladies away, change spouses, change partners, using women almost like pawns in a game. And God reached in to protect women even under the law, gave them some respect, even when being tossed aside in divorce. You can read Deuteronomy 24 on your own, see this conditional situation and how it all works out with a certificate of divorce. But Christopher Wright puts it like this: the practical effects of all this is to protect the unfortunate woman from becoming a kind of marital football passed between irresponsible men. So the certificate of divorce in Israel protected the woman from the changing whims of the husband. If he decided to put her away, then God would make sure she would at least have her freedom, not have to wear the label adulterer, allowed her to marry again with some respect. So by Jesus' time, things were a mess. The law was being manipulated. Women were being used. Marriages were being abused. So Jesus calls them out, calls them back to the original intention from the very beginning. The certificate of divorce was good. It's the minimum. But Jesus cannot leave it there, as he has not before. So listen to what he says. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits the adultery himself. They must have had reasons for getting divorced. They must have figured those were good reasons. Jesus gives them one good reason, and it's extreme. It's not a have to. It's a if you have to, then so be it, but do it like this. Fornication, adultery, sex outside of marriage, infidelity, call it what you want. It's a marriage killer. It doesn't have to kill a marriage, but it can. Marriages can survive infidelity, adultery, cheating. Did you know that? But it takes time, a lot of time and a lot of healing and a lot of forgiveness and a desire to honor God and the vows you took, but it's possible. Still, adultery is difficult to overcome, and Jesus knows it. When the intimate trust is broken, it's difficult to heal it. And even when it comes in, it doesn't mean you have to run out. God can redeem any broken marriage. He can heal the greatest offense. So please don't jump out. Consider what's at stake. Even God knows sometimes marriage is broken beyond repair. But what happens if there's just the idea to leave a marriage? No adultery, no sexual infidelity, no just cause, no great offense. You just want out. Time to let your wife go. Let your husband walk away. You decide it's time to be finished with this. He's saying, do you understand what you are doing? Because maybe you don't. Let Jesus explain it. He says, you're sinning. You're sinning against her, maybe against him. You're bringing the sin down on your partner. Your selfishness, your desires, your wants, your longings to be out of this and into that, to leave her and take her. You're tainting her or him and the relationships beyond that. You're creating victims and scarring the other person with your sin. Don't you see what you're doing? The man or the woman, as the case may be, who wishes to participate in sin just because they're done, rethink it. Your sin is infecting those around you. It's bigger than COVID. It's worse than you think. It's far-reaching, and it affects all who are touched by it. There's some in here who have been touched by divorce. Touched is a light word. How about devastated by it? If you think divorce is no big deal, then talk to somebody who's been through it. They'll change your mind. And don't believe the lie. You can just get rid of this spouse and you'll be better off. I disagree. Jesus disagrees. We may like to talk about exceptions, but Jesus is pretty clear here. We may all have disagreements on what he really means, but there's no misunderstanding this. It comes down to this: don't divorce. We may be quick to qualify some things here and jump to what Jesus says elsewhere, or go to what Paul said in one of his letters, but just stay here for a moment. We like to excuse some things and allow some things and broaden the scope to include some things, but be careful, just for a moment. Let us caution each other and just stay here and hear Jesus. I know we understand different scenarios and sympathize with different situations and speak with grace when confronted with certain stories, and I get it. I do it too. But allow Jesus for a moment to set the standard where it should be. Don't soften it, don't dumb it down, don't explain it away. I know we all know why divorce happens sometimes, and there's some folks in here that can tell you sometimes in a marriage there's nothing else you can do. When your spouse decides they're done, it's over. We've got a lot of mercy and grace for those kind of folks who've been through it. I just want for a moment, though, to let Jesus speak to those who are married, to those who would like to consider other options and maybe get out of the one they're in. Listen to what Jesus is saying over those who are shouting. Jesus sets the standard. Allow him to do it. He puts the bar here. Let it stay. Except for adultery, marital unfaithfulness, sexual infidelity, there's really no good reason for divorce. Marriage should be honored by all. Stick with your commitment. Do what you said you'd do. And I know we want to jump to exceptions, and I can think of some. Like somebody is being abused, I would say protect yourself. Get away from the abuser. Protect your finances. Protect your children. Do it. There are times I would even say get away from that. But I think he's speaking to those who are just considering letting the other one go, stepping out, getting a new one. To be honest, in my years of ministry, my years of living, I understand the pain of divorce, and when people say things and it can't go anywhere and it's ending, and I hurt with those people. But to be honest, I have become weary at times hearing people say, I have fallen out of love with my spouse. I love him, I'm just not in love with them. My feelings have changed, things change, people grow apart. I'm just not happy anymore. I've heard that too many times in my lifetime, and some of those are from some who say, I'm still following Jesus. I know there are exceptions. Jesus gives his exception right here. Stick with that. I know things happen. I know some people are the innocent party and say, I have done nothing wrong. I know we jump to what Paul might say later on, but stay here just for a moment. And if you are married, let him warn you and hold the bar high and demand some things of his followers that others may not want to hear. Jesus is going back to the original intent of it all. Pay attention to where he's going and what he's saying. For him who's the originator of the law, the creator of every man and woman and marriage itself, and knows what is best and knows what is right and knows what will bless you, then listen to him say it. Because marriage is supposed to be a commitment for a long time, for the lifetime, for the long haul. To the end, the covenant vow is supposed to be good and solid. The promise should be kept. The commitment should not waver. It does not matter if the circumstances or desires or feelings change. This is how it's supposed to be. So let him say it. Believe him when he says it. We'll speak more about divorce as he comes to it again in chapter 19. So this isn't the final word, but by all means, let this challenge you. And in the Sermon on the Mount, we keep looking at the negatives, Because Jesus does say, don't, but I think he's pointing to the positive, even in the prohibition. Does it sound like he's against divorce and adultery? He is. But he is for marriage. Does it sound like he is against lust and adultery and divorce? He is. But he is for marriage. Don't get stuck on the negative and miss the positive. John Stott, who said, I've been a Christian pastor for many years, and he said, if somebody comes to me and says, I want to speak to you about divorce, he said, I refuse. He said, I've made the rule never to speak with anybody about divorce until I have first spoken with him or her about two other subjects, namely marriage and reconciliation. Sometimes a discussion, he says, on marriage and reconciliation makes the other topic unnecessary. Wright points out that this passage sits between two other issues if you've been paying attention and if you know what's coming next. So in some ways, these two things sandwich in this one thing. And he says, if we as a people knew how to control our bodily lusts on one hand, verses 27 to 30, and we're committed to complete integrity and truth-telling on the other, verses 33 to 37, there may be fewer divorces in the middle. He writes, divorce normally happens when lust and lies have been allowed to grow up like weeds and choke the fragile, beautiful plant of marriage. I may not be able to answer your questions about divorce. You and I may not agree if we talk very long about how we see it. But if we could focus on the positives and work on our own marriages, maybe we wouldn't have to think about the situation called divorce. Paul Rogers, a preacher in a Tennessee Church of Christ, thinks about all the people who've always said to him through all the years as a preacher, I don't want a divorce. They would say, I don't want a divorce. He said, then could I give you some advice? Put your mate first. Learn to express your love to your mate. Learn to live within your means. Learn to build, not blast, the self-esteem of your partner. Do not marry a mate with the idea of reforming him or her. Learn to compromise with each other. Seek and find common goals and directions. Reject interference from in-laws and relatives. Learn to communicate what's in your heart. Determine today that your marriage is a gift from God, set apart by God, designed to last as long as you or your spouse lives and is pleasing in God's sight. And I'd like to say something too that piggybacks on one thing he said. If you're not married yet, make sure you marry somebody who is committed to Jesus, not goes to church. That's easy. Committed to Jesus. Marry somebody who would never consider divorce as an option. We'll come back to this later in Matthew. Let's keep reading because we've got more ground to cover. Verse 33, again, you've heard that it was said to people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you've made. Amen. But Jesus has more to say. Again, but I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you can't make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one. Once again, what is true is right. Don't break your oath. But there's more than that. The wisdom of Ecclesiastes, if you were listening, don't be quick with your mouth. Don't be hasty in your heart to utter anything to God. Let your words be few. When you make a vow, don't delay, fulfill it. He takes no pleasure in fools. Do what you said you would do. In fact, it's better not to even make a vow to God than to make it and not fulfill it. God's not us. We speak when we shouldn't. We say things we didn't mean. We use words, manipulate sentences, create a truth by saying something to make sure they hear me say this so we can use it for our benefit. God's not us. He speaks the truth and always speaks the truth. We guard the truth. We move the truth. We hide the truth. We manipulate the truth. We only let it out when we need it. We use right words to convey right messages so the right people hear us say the right thing. Even when it comes to vows, promises, and oaths, we use it to our advantage. The old children thing, I didn't mean it, I had my fingers crossed, becomes something adults use too, not with fingers, just with words. I didn't mean it. I don't have to do it. Our family has loved over the years watching Survivor. I'm not saying it's great, but we watch it. It's a horrible commentary on humanity, a reality show that puts people in intentional places where they're going to have to be deceitful and lie. They will do anything to win the $1 million, and they do. And you hear people lie all the time. They shake on it. They pinky swear on it. They even swear on my mother's grave, but they don't mean it. They don't do it. They lie in your face, all to win. Once in a while, you'll find a halfway decent person, an honest person, a Christian person on there who tries their best not to lie much or not to lie to certain people, to try to be truthful, but they don't last long usually, because you have to lie at some point in the game, and usually all the time. The best example, if you've watched Survivor, of the twisting and manipulating and outright killing of the truth was Johnny Fairplay, season 7, when he talked about his grandmother who just died. Sad. But his grandmother was at home watching him on the television. She was just fine, but he lied to play it right. Johnny Fairplay played them, and he took the #1 spot for the 18 all-time greatest Survivor moments in history. Johnny Fairplay lied like a dog. That legendary reputation was brought up by one of the good guys, Rupert, who challenged Russell, one of the bad guys and worst ever, by telling him, "You've already proven yourself to be a disgusting, terrible human being, to swear on your kids' lives." Can you imagine someone swearing or promising and then breaking it? It happens every day. Swearing on your children's lives or your grandmother's life, are we surprised? Michael Card quotes Stanley Hauerwas saying, "Oaths are a sign that we live in a world of lies." And then Card goes on to say, "But Jesus' kingdom is no world of lies. So even the taking of oaths isn't tolerated. For the followers of Jesus who live within the context of the new righteousness, a casual word is as serious as a binding oath. Our words simply mean what they say." Some of you younger folks are going to have trouble believing this, but here's the truth. My grandpa lived in a day in his little town of Alhambra, Illinois, where he could walk to the bank, hold out his hand, shake the man's hand, and get a loan. Nothing signed, no paperwork, no authorization. The banker gave him money because he was a man of honor. His word was truth. Those days are gone. Nobody trusts anybody anymore. Everybody believes everybody else is lying, and they may be right. It's hard to believe, but there was a day when my grandpa would have left his front door unlocked and the keys in his car, fearing nobody would come take it. It didn't happen. In the community of poor people, and he was poor among the poor farmers, they still trusted each other, because when you were poor didn't mean you were despicable. You might not have had anything of yours, of substance, but you didn't steal from other people. You might say you could steal to put food on the family table, but poor people don't have to steal. Nowadays, even people who don't need it steal and lie and manipulate and do what they must not do. Lying? Everybody is lying. January 2020, CNN reported that people lie, and they lie a lot all the time. They even lie, to quote, "They even lie in order to maintain a good, honest reputation." They lie so others will think they're honest. That's where we are. Randy Harris is a teacher in one of our Christian colleges. He tests his students with a scenario and gives it to them. He gives them this scenario. You put yourself in their shoes. You are in college and about to graduate from college. It's your last semester coming up. You will be graduating with an accounting degree. You have a person who is going to marry you, and you have a job lined up at a great accounting firm. Life is perfect. Then you get a call from the registrar. There's one class you missed, and you can't graduate until you take it. The class is Early American Literature. You are bored by that title, but you squeeze it into your schedule. You have to read first The Scarlet Letter, which is all about sex but ends up being terribly boring, which is what a Puritan is able to do with the subject. And then you read Huckleberry Finn. And you read other poetry that doesn't even rhyme. And you keep getting through it from assignment to assignment. And then it comes to this. The very last thing, read the great American novel, Moby Dick. It's an 800-page book about whaling. Since you're from Kansas, you care nothing about the subject. You will not read it. But you go get the Cliff Notes instead. You watch both movies about Moby Dick. Maybe you won't get an A in the class. Maybe you'll just squeak by with a passing grade, but you'll be done, you'll graduate, and all will be perfect again. You come to the final day, to the final class, to the final test, and your idiot of a professor gives you one question on the test. Did you read Moby Dick? If you answer truthfully, you will fail the final, fail the class. You will not graduate, you won't get your job, and there's no way the person who promised to marry you will marry a loser. Now, what will you do? He goes on to write, for most of us, when it comes down to it, if the cost is high enough, our integrity is for sale. But if we go through the rest of our lives deciding whether we're going to tell the truth or not based on a cost-benefit analysis, we're going to lie a lot. But Jesus comes along and he says, I want you to have an integrity that runs so deep that when you say yes, it always means yes, and when you say no, it always means no. Barclay writes about this custom that they must have had, that they had reached themselves into this corner where they kind of held these two oaths up as different. One was binding and one was not. If you used God's name in an oath, then it was binding. If you didn't, it was not. So you might say, by the God of heaven, I will do that. You used God, you will do that. It's binding. But if I say, by heaven itself, I will do that, I didn't say God, only heaven, therefore I don't have to do it. That's where they were. Depending on what you said, you could manipulate the truth by how you swore, by what you swore over. You could keep it or not. The result, Barclay says, was the evasion of truth had become a fine art. So if a man brought God into the transaction, it was serious. If he did not, it was not. In effect, Jesus was saying, you can't do that. God's already there. You don't invite him into different compartments in your life or leave him out. God is already there. We regard all promises as sacred. We remember all promises are made in the presence of God. So speak the truth. Just speak the truth. Say yes and say no and leave it there. Build a reputation so that you are believable, a man or woman of integrity, where people believe you because that's only what you say, the truth. There are some truths here in the Sermon on the Mount that people don't really want to hear. Don't hate. Don't call your brother a fool. Don't get angry. Don't lust. Don't divorce. Speak the truth. Commitment matters. Truth matters. But what if you have messed up on any one of those or all of those? What if you have hated and held a grudge and said horrible things about people? What if you have lusted in your heart? What if you have stepped outside of your marriage? What if you have committed adultery? What if you have been divorced? What if you have not spoken the truth and you've used the truth for your advantage when it's good? Then let's be honest about all of that too. If there is any hope for us in divorce, in lust, in adultery, in anger, in hatred, in oath-taking or truth-telling, if there is any hope for those that have messed it up on every level, then you will find hope here. Here. For those that have been through it and messed it all up and cannot stand today on integrity on any of those levels, there is hope. There is forgiveness. There is redemption for those that have messed it all up. Here we will hold the truth and we will speak the truth, and you may not like the truth. But here in this church, we'll be honest about those of us who have messed it up for way too long. Maybe you've heard the song Truth Be Told by Matthew West. Lie number one, you're supposed to have it all together. And when they ask you how you're doing, just smile and tell them, never better. Lie number 2, everybody's life is perfect except for yours, so keep your messes and your wounds and your secrets safe with you behind closed doors. Truth be told, the truth is rarely told. I say, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, I'm fine. Hey, I'm fine, but I'm not. I'm broken. And when it's out of control, I say it's under control, but it's not. And God, you know it. I don't know why it's so hard to admit it, when being honest is the only way to fix it. There's no failure, no fall. There's no sin you don't already know, so let the truth be told. The truth is this. Jesus wants us to be just like His Father, who is holy and righteous and pure and good and perfect. And the bad news for all of us is we're none of those things, me included. But the best news of all is He came to die for those of us who were none of those things at all. He came to save the worst of the worst, and I am just that. I followed Him right into the waters of baptism, and He has made me right and righteous and perfect. Not because I am, because He's given me His perfection and righteousness. And that's why we have hope. Here in this church, we will speak the truth and hold out the truth even when it's uncomfortable to say. And we will hold out hope and forgiveness for those who do not know the truth and for have not done the truth and spoken the truth. But here, let the truth be told. Come if you need to. Let's stand and sing.